Hi, guys. Well, welcome to the Buffalo Leadership Academy discussion, session 3. I'm so thrilled to be surrounded by incredible and amazing leaders today. We are going to be joined by John McCaskill, retired Navy SEAL commander. Hi, John.
Hey,
As well
Laura.
as Philip. Hi, and as well as Philip Coots, who's a former Navy SEAL and author. And we are also joined by the lovely Dr. Teresa Larson, who's also a Marine and author and many other things. I'll let them introduce themselves. But in today's session, we are going to be talking about leading with fear. And for those of you that have just joined us, you may wonder, what on earth are they talking about? Leading with fear? But we're not talking about the traditional fear. If you look behind me, you'll see what I'm talking about. So we have created an acronym around fear, and it is focus, emotion, adaptability, and reverence. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to my fellow Buffaloes to introduce themselves. And then we will go straight into the session to start discussing around this fear, leading with fear in our lives. All right, John, over to you. It'd be great for you to introduce yourself.
Thanks, Laura. I'm very excited to be discussing this topic and even wrapping the traditional fear around it. But yes, quick intro. As Laura said, I'm retired Navy SEAL Commander John McCaskill, and now I teach mindfulness, meditation, and leadership. And these are things that I'm very passionate about. So I'm very excited to be talking about this topic in and of itself and the 4 different aspects of it. And I know this team right here is well prepared to cover each one of those 4 points. So, yeah, that's a little bit about me, and I'll kick it over to Philip.
Hey guys, welcome. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Philip Kuntz. I'm a former Navy SEAL, and I'm a life coach and an executive business coach as well, too, public speaker for the last 8 years, author as well. And really excited to be here. Really excited to be talking about fear. What does that look like? Leaders have fear, real fear, and how can we lead with the fear that we're going to be talking about today? So super excited. Thanks for joining us. And I'm kicking it over to Dr. T.
Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Teresa Larson, a doctor of physical therapy, so otherwise movement expert is what I like to consider myself and am. Marine Corps veteran, so I was an engineer in the Marine Corps, and I always tell people when I did do pickup lines at local areas, bars, I used to blow things up for a living, and now I blow your minds on movement and mobility. And what I'll be talking today about is adaptability, the adaptability piece. But I'm a wife, a mother of 2 little boys. I live in a great part of Colorado, Southwest Colorado, and I run a business called Movement RX, which is a human performance business, helping people stay ahead of their health problems, be proactive about them, and feel empowered about the things they can control in their health. And this is very important for all leaders out there, because if you don't have your health, which is a huge part of wealth, then it's going to be very hard to run your business for the long game. So to include lead your family. So that's a little bit about me, and I will kick it back up to you, Laura.
Great. Oh my gosh, guys, this is going to be so exciting. So, just for those of you that have just joined us, we are the Buffalo Leadership Academy. We're just introducing ourselves right now. We're in session 3. We're going to be talking about leading with fear, not the traditional fear, but as you can see here, focus, emotion, adaptability, and reverence. And just to give a little introduction of myself, I'm Laura Jones. I'm the founder and CEO of Be a Legend, and we enhance leadership performance. So there are 3 areas that we focus on specifically, but that is the main focus of enhancing leadership performance to allow your teams to identify better with communication and emotional intelligence and many other different aspects in leadership. And I just found out recently that even though the intro said 3-time Worldwide Stevie Award winner, I'm very proud to announce that I have just found out I've won a further 2 Stevie Awards, and this time gold in Thought Leadership of the Year and also Company of the Year for our business. So very, very excited. I'm also an author of my upcoming book that will be out early fall this year. It's called Hunt or Be Hunted. So check it out. Yes, gosh, I'm also a mother. I'm an athlete. And I have 3 beautiful boys, 2 of them living. And yes, there's many other aspects of what I do on a daily basis. But we are also missing one particular buffalo today. If you've tuned in before, you may be wondering, where is Travis? Where's Travis? Where is he, guys? Well, Travis is a Marine veteran. He's an author. He's an expert leader. He's many things. And right now he's out changing the world just like us buffaloes do. So he was not able to join us in person today, but he's very much here in spirit with us all. He's a big part of what we're doing here at the Buffalo Leadership Academy. The 5 of us together came up with leading with fear. So I'm going to go into that and what I'm actually talking about. And welcome to those guys that have just joined us. As I mentioned, if you have just tuned in, we are the Buffalo Leadership Academy. And I'm going to go into what is leading with fear all about. And then I will kick it over to John here in a moment where he's going to be focused on focus. There you go. How do you like that? So what do we mean by leading with fear? Well, as I mentioned, it's not the traditional fear, but it's really talking about focus, emotion, adaptability, and reverence. And leading through fear in leadership, it means using fear as like that motivator to drive your team towards success. I'm sure we've all been in situations in our life where we've had some type of fearful situation, and it's used us to be, to push us forward. Just as a little intro here, I moved to this country 7 years ago with nothing but a laptop and a few clothes and my brain. And if that isn't fear enough, I don't know what is, And so it was, I use that fear as motivation. So as we go through fear and we start really focusing on what does that actually mean and what are the elements of how we cope with any fear that comes into our life, I think, you're going to start learning a lot about the different elements, the different types of, emotional intelligence, adaptability, the different types of focus you can have, and really, what is reverence and what's that all about? How does it lead into what we do in our daily life? So, you got to be really clear and concise when you're setting goals for your team as well. And that really does come under the focus side, and just encouraging healthy competition as well among team members, as well as setting challenges, but achievable objectives and so forth. So I'm going to hand it off to John, where he's going to be focused on. There we go. I've used it again. Focused on focus. Don't you just love it? It's brilliant. That should be a new thing. But yes. So hey, John, to talk about focus in our FEAR acronym. As a leader in the sales teams, how important was focus for you? And can you just discuss with our audience here today of different ways that you can develop it?
Yes, Laura. Like I said at the beginning, I love the FEAR acronym, but then even more specifically, I love this topic, focus. And as a retired Navy SEAL leader, and now as a mindfulness and meditation teacher, that is what I teach, is focus. So let's start with why focus is so important in leadership. Being a leader requires the ability to make quick decisions and to stay calm under pressure. And without that focus, leaders can become very easily distracted. They can become overwhelmed. They can become reactive. And I say reactive very specifically rather than responsive, because there is a difference between reacting and responding. And we want leaders to respond rather than just react. Because reacting, being overwhelmed, being distracted, that can significantly compromise your effectiveness, your decision-making, and your overall abilities as a leader. Focused leaders are always going to be more productive, more effective, more efficient, and ultimately successful in getting their team to do what it is they need to do. Because that's what a leader does, is use their influence to get a team to do what they need to do. So you're going to be more effective, more productive, more efficient, and more successful in doing that. And the military is an excellent example of the importance of focus in leadership. In combat situations, leaders need to be laser focused on the mission, while always remaining aware of their surroundings and potential threats. We have a saying in the military that it's people always, mission first, people always. And on the battlefield, you have to be aware of the mission and you have to be aware of the people. And specifically for me on the battlefield, I would need as a leader to be aware of where my men were and what they were doing. And I needed to be aware of where the enemy were and what they were doing. I needed to be aware of where supporting assets were. So what I mean by supporting assets is our friendly planes, our friendly drones, and other friendly elements. So other, Army, Navy, Air Force elements that were surrounding us that may be able to come in and offer us support. And I needed to be aware of where they were and what they were doing. And finally, I obviously needed to be aware of where I was and what I was doing, right? And so a lack of focus can be deadly. Similarly, in everyday work, family, community, society as a whole, leaders need to remain focused on their objectives regardless of the distractions or obstacles. So now I've spoken about why it's important, and I've given a kind of overall example, but I'd be remiss if I neglected to speak about how to develop it, because focus is a skill and it can be developed through training and practice. Teresa and I have spoken in the past about multitasking and how you want to actually minimize the attempts to multitask and prioritize being a monotasker when you can. What can help with that? What can help you to become more focused? What can help you to become that monotasker and get into that flow? Mindfulness meditation. That's one example. It's a powerful tool for improving that focus and concentration. By learning to observe your thoughts and emotions without judgment, you can train your brain to be more focused and attentive. Additionally, developing healthy habits, and you talked about this a little bit before we ever went live, Laura, developing healthy habits such as getting enough sleep, exercise, proper nutrition, that can help your brain, and with helping your brain, you can improve your focus and overall mental clarity. So that's another thing you can use to develop focus. Now, last thing I want to discuss is the benefits of focus beyond leadership, because yes, we are leaders, but we're also followers. We're also members of society, not just leaders. So we want to talk about how focus can benefit us in leadership, but aside from leadership, how else can it help us? Well, developing focus can benefit individuals in all aspects of life, not just leadership. It can help us to be more focused in our relationships, leading to better relationships, improve productivity as a follower or as a member of society, as a member of an organization, and it can increase our overall sense of well-being and fulfillment. So by training the mind to be more focused, individuals can better manage stress, manage anxiety, be a better and more active member of a relationship, and we can have those happier, healthier, and more fulfilling lives. So overall, focus is a critical component of effective leadership, and developing this skill is essential for success in any and all fields. So thanks for letting me share my focus on focus, Laura, and I'll turn it back over to you, my friend, for that emotion piece. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely, John. That was fascinating, and incredibly important to have in leadership. Just like you said, having that focus is really going to be the drive to allow others within your team to see, okay, well, this is, we've got a set goal, and this is where we need to get to. But how do we get there? And they're going to be looking to you, their leader, right? And so you've got to set that example and show them how you go about doing that. I think there's so many elements of focus that you just discussed, and thank you so much, John. I really appreciate that. Well, our second piece is actually something that I'm going to be talking about, and welcome to those that have just joined us. And if you have just joined, just to give you a heads up of what we're talking about here with the Buffalo Leadership Academy team. We're down at Buffalo today because Jarvis is out changing the world. So you're left with the four of us today. And that's John, Philip, and Teresa, and myself, Lara, and we are covering session 3, and it is about leading with fear, but not your traditional fear. It is talking about focus, emotion, adaptability, and reverence. So John just very, very well explained about focus in leadership, and the importance of that, and how, some skills of how you can develop that. So it leads us into the second part of the FEAR acronym, which is emotion. And specifically, what I want to talk to you about today is the emotional intelligence. So emotional intelligence is an incredibly crucial factor in effective leadership. And it really just refers to the capacity to be aware of your emotions, effectively regulate them, and understand how they may impact others. One of the things that I've talked a lot about, and I see regularly out there, is that usually leaders are really good maybe in one area of emotional intelligence, maybe a couple of different areas, but getting all of the areas together to work cohesively is going to be a game changer if you really want to make that difference and have a team that can communicate in a way that they understand with each other. What I mean by that is you've got to be able to read a room, right? You've got to be able to self-regulate your emotions as well. And sometimes there's situations where that can come out, and sometimes there's situations where it needs to be, addressed at a later point. Recognizing your emotions is incredibly important as well. That's actually the first step. And so, something I actually wanted to show you today is in fact, let me just take this off for one moment. I'm going to be sharing with you what I call the 4-dimensional model of emotional intelligence. And up here we have self-awareness. Can you all see this okay, guys, by the way? Is this, yeah, we can. Okay. All right. So we've got self-awareness up here. We have self-management in this box. And I excuse my writing. I've often been told that my writing is not very readable, but you know what? It's great to whiteboard stuff like this. So you can take a screenshot, you can make notes for those of you that are watching live. All right, so it really comes under these 4 areas. And on the self-awareness piece, it comes down to having that self-confidence, and being aware of your own emotional state. And the reason why that is so important is because if we don't recognize our own behavior, we don't know how it's impacting others. And when we're leaders, we absolutely have to be tuned in to our own emotions and how that is impacting our team. Because we may see ourselves in one particular light, but how others see us is actually what's important. So if they're seeing us in a different way to how we think we are, that's an issue, right? So we have to be very self-aware and pay attention to how others influence your emotional state as well. That's also very important. So that's a bit about the self-awareness piece, but then we come down to self-management. And what do I mean by that? Well, it's keeping our emotions in check, right? There's certain situations, like I mentioned, where, it could be relevant for those emotions to come out, but there's other situations where it may not be. And so we have to learn, how do we self-regulate those emotions? There's so many different strategies and tools that are available. And I can, we as a Buffalo Leadership Academy can actually teach on this. But we don't have time today to go through all of it, but, obviously stay tuned for further information with regards to that. But it is incredibly important that we, have to be able to handle change in a very flexible manner as well. And that just it all comes down to how we self-manage our emotions. And then we've got the social awareness piece. And that really is about picking up the mood in the room and being able to read a room and being able to change and adapt quickly from the reading that you've just taken of the room's temperature. And so it's also about caring what others are going through. You've got to be really in tune with your team and the people around you. I've mentioned this a lot in some of the work that I do, but everybody talks about, AI and how, we're all in the digital age now and everything is quick, 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 now. But the one thing that people seem to forget is who got us there? Human beings. And who's on your team? Human beings. And human beings are complicated. We're complicated beings with complicated emotions. We don't just have little buttons that you can just press like a computer and it happens straight away. It's so important that you understand the emotional intelligence piece of our FEAR acronym, because if you don't, you will be creating the actual fear within your team. And, when it does come down to the social awareness piece, and I was talking about, picking up the mood in the room and caring about what others are going through, you've got to be present with them as well and actually hear what it is they're really saying. I'm sure, like, if we had you all live here being able to raise your hands, and in fact, my fellow Buffaloes, you can probably, help me on this part. But how many times have you been in a situation where you're hearing something that someone's saying, like you can hear the words, but actually you realize, you know what, they're not really saying that. They're actually saying this. I mean, I'm sure my fellow Buffaloes have been in situations, throughout their life. Yeah, exactly. And so we've got to always keep that in mind. And it's something that we have to practice, right? So I'm not saying these come naturally, but they have to be something that we practice almost every single day. If you get these three and you really hone in on that, what you're going to get is this piece, which is the relationship side. It's the relationship management. You'll be able to get along well with others. You'll be able to understand others in a way that they can decode the information that you're encoding to them. And so you'll be able to handle conflict effectively by applying all these three different pieces. You'll be able to clearly express different ideas, different opinions. You'll be able to allow others to express their opinion and take that in a way that you can then process and compartmentalize and put together as a whole, and realize that every single person in that room, however different that they may react or think or behave, that's how they feel in that moment. And if we don't take that into account on the emotional piece as human beings, then we've failed as leaders. Because as I mentioned, we're not computers. We can't just press buttons and, in a click of a button, you just have everybody do what you want them to do. So as you can tell, very, very passionate about the emotional intelligence piece. And I could go on for a long time about a few other things, but I just want to leave you with this. Some of you may have heard about the wise mind, and if you haven't, that's okay. But as human beings, we are wired to react to situations emotionally. You can't change that. And there's some of us out there that are left brain thinking, which means we're logical. And there's a lot out there that are right brain thinking that, are more creative and tuned in very heavily with their emotions. However, you cannot get away from the fact that as human beings, we are tuned or wired, I should say, to react to situations emotionally. So I want you to keep in mind this. Over here, we have the emotional mind. Over here, we have the rational mind. But in between, this is where we need to be as leaders. This is called the wise mind. It is somewhere in between the rational and the emotional. And this may not come naturally to many. And that's okay. That's okay. That's what we're here for, right, guys? That is what we're here for. But we can help teach a lot of strategies and tools surrounding this. And just to finish up on the rational side, on the rational mind, this is where we base everything on facts and logic, reason, pragmatics. On the emotional mind side, this is where we are emotion focused, we're mood dependent, impulsive, and guided by our feelings, right? But what happens if we make too many decisions based on feelings and we don't take into account the facts? Well, in certain situations, it could be life or death, right? In other situations, it could be getting a deal or not getting a deal. In other situations, it could be keeping my team happy and fulfilled or losing that team. And so we have to take into account, like, really, how much of the emotional mind do we want to play in with our rational mind? So you've got to take a piece of both. And so the wise mind really, when you look at it and it covers, takes those two pieces into account, that's where you have the intuition, you have the values, you've got, the needs, it's the present moment. And it's just integrating reason with emotion. And like I said, it's not an easy skill to attain, but it's definitely attainable. And if you haven't looked into any type of emotional intelligence training or anything like that with your teams, I'd highly encourage it. I'd really highly encourage it. Or you can reach out to us, Buffaloes. And in fact, I'm just going to end on this point before I kick it over to Teresa. But for those of you that have just joined, we are talking about leading with fear, and that's fear, emotion, adaptability, and reverence. And if you do want to learn more information about some of these topics that you're hearing today, and you're like, this really does pique an interest, all you have to do is just text the word Buffalo, 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 to 33777. So if you haven't done that already, do it now. Text Buffalo to 33777, and you can start learning some more information about what we're talking about here today, as well as in some of our other sessions. So to end that segment on the emotion, we're now going to go on to the next section of our FEAR acronym, which is adaptability. And we're joined by the lovely Dr. Teresa Larson, who's going to talk to us all about adaptability in leadership. One of the things I do want to say about adaptability is, I'm sure, Teresa, you can agree here, but adaptive leaders are really skilled in recognizing opportunities and threats and being able to adjust their plans accordingly in order to achieve their objectives. And there is a certain skill set, attached to that. I'm sure Teresa is going to be talking to us all about that today. So, Dr. Teresa Larson, let me ask you, what does adaptability actually mean? And how is it relevant in leadership?
Well, I am chomping at the bit to talk about this. And you served it up so well, Laura, because this is emotional intelligence and being able to understand, like the wise mind, being able to understand the facts around your situation is really important to adapting well versus maladapting. And so I'm actually going to take kind of a micro and macro approach to talking about adaptation, because it's a word that's thrown around a lot. And it all started 10 years ago when I first started my physical therapy practice, which we recently sold, but I was working with a Navy SEAL in my PT practice. And I had just started my business because I said peace out to the company I was working with, gave them my 2 weeks notice. I wanted to go out on my own. And I had this young man sitting in front of me. He had a traumatic brain injury. And he had just done the workout Murph twice, back to back. And he had just suffered a traumatic brain injury, right? And he was in a class that the coaches didn't know how to work with this warrior, and just was like, okay, well, you're a Navy SEAL, sure, go and do Murph. But right, he struggled with a TBI. And so he'd come to me to work through some of his issues with dizziness, migraines, and balance. And so in speaking to him, it was the first time I'd worked with someone with outside of school, a significant injury like this, who really, there's a lot of things going on. He was also dealing with alcoholism, right? And struggling with coping and all the things that can go with just having a traumatic brain injury and the emotional struggles of that, and having to leave the SEAL teams and find a new path. And so there was a lot to work through with this young man. But the thing I told him was that you are you are adapting and overcoming right now, and it's a process. It is going to be a journey for you, right? For this young man to actually habituate and not get as dizzy and not experience migraines, he had to progress through healing through his injury versus just, feel good one day and then go do Murph twice or some, other workout. So, but the process of helping him heal, as well as, I'm not an addiction therapist, but even helping him find help for his addiction, took time. But he was able to, over the course of a year, get help and actually be able to do the kinds of workouts he liked to do, but without the migraine and without the dizziness. And that is an example of adapting, right? His body, through proper progression and healing, and through the therapy he got, both physical and mental, he was able to change. And that's a powerful thing, because now he actually got his doctorate in physical therapy, and he is now working with other individuals, right, and sharing his story. And this is now 10 years later. I think he even started his own nonprofit. So that's like a high level picture. But what I think is powerful about that is the ability to change, right? He left something he'd worked his whole life to be part of. He had to, because of his injury, and he had to change. And that's really, really hard for people. But he was able to do that, right? Through mentally and physically. He was able to feel less dizzy and have less migraines. His body was able to shift physiologically because he allowed himself to progress properly. So adaptation basically is the ability to adjust and thrive in changing circumstances, right? So think about your own life. What new normals have you just gone through? Is it an injury? Is it a divorce? Is it a change of jobs, right? Is it an increase of funds that your company got, right? So how are you shifting and adjusting to that new normal that you now have? And there's two ways you can do it, right? You can maladjust, or you can adjust optimally. And that can happen on a micro level, but also a macro level. So let's talk about the micro level first. Okay. So the micro level is just cellularly in your body. And I think this is really powerful. And when I speak and do workshops on mindfulness and movement, and I speak with John these sometimes, it's like we speak on the ability to change, this concept called elasticity. It's really important, like the ability to change, like knowing that those panic attacks you have, or that stress response that you have, and the quick reaction that you have via text or email, you can change that, right? Or the fact that your neck is always in pain, or your back, like you can change that too, right? Depending on the situation. But your body goes through this thing called homeostasis. It's always trying to come back to balance. Basically, homeostasis means balance. So when you're cold, your body heats up, right? When you're hot, your body wants to cool down. When you're going and doing strength training, your body builds strength, right? It adapts to it cellularly. So when you expose yourself to these stimuluses, right now, like John, for example, is cooling down. So when you expose yourself to, being around good people, right? Like I'm just feeling this energy right now, even with these fellow buffaloes, like I'm around them. When I expose myself to going out to walking or cold therapy or heat therapy, or play with my kids, like my body is adapting cellularly to that, right? It's feeding into that, and changing. And so, on a micro level, just know your body is changing all the time. And so when we expose our bodies and our minds to challenging things, doing hard things, right? Like running a business or a cold therapy, right? 30 seconds a day of a little bit of cold shower can help your body fight infection, right? Just not wearing comfortable shoes all the time. We have a comfort crisis in our country. Like when you start to stand more, walk more, move more, wear less flatter shoes, wear your bare feet, wear your feet. Don't forget to put on your feet today. When you, sorry, this, when you expose yourself to more challenging things, have the hard conversation, choose to forgive, choose to have the wise mind versus feeding into some of just the overwhelming feelings, right? your body will adapt, your mind will adapt and change. It's called neuroplasticity in the mind and the body, right? The elastic response of stretching more, mobilizing more, your body will change. That hot spot you have in your neck and your low back can change with movement. So it depends on the tissue, of course, and the amount of stimulus you give it over time. But literally, there's research around if you walk 30 minutes a day, right, you can change your feet, your hip mobility, your low back, right, your eyesight. Didn't even know that. Was researching that the other day. So there's a lot of things that you can change. Like walking basically improves everything. But on a cellular level, know that change can happen. And I found this powerful to know because I was having, I wouldn't say they were panic attacks, but I would have an incredible stress response over certain things, especially relationship wise with my family. And when I learned how to create calm through mindfulness and meditation, that I just the talk therapy I was doing was like, that was almost too much. I needed a way to learn to relax, learn to train the monkey mind from not freaking out. So mindfulness and meditation was very helpful for me in my healing years, which is, well, healing's a constant for me and probably a constant for all of you. But that helped train my mind over time to, when I had a stressor, my response became different than freaking out or not knowing what to do or whatever was going on. I was able to respond effectively. And I think that's important, right? How are you training? Well, one, ask yourself, how are you training your mind to be calm and to respond versus react, right? So, and then body, how are you training your body to be, I like to call it bulletproof, right? Or injury proof. That's maybe another good way. How are you training it? Like, how are you creating stimulus with it, putting stimulus on it every day so you can be around for the long haul for your family and your business? Sitting every day, all day is crushing people, crushing their health. And yeah, you may think that you got to be in front of a computer all day answering emails and just that 1 hour workout's going to do something for you, but it's not. Constant stimulus to your body and moving, sitting, standing up, walking around, right? That's, you need a motion is lotion. That will help your body stay injury proof. So on a macro level, right, it's, so we know our bodies can change and our minds can change. And I think that's a very powerful concept because for those of us, I think, that aren't in the science space, it can be overwhelming when you have pain, emotionally or physically. But to know that change can happen and healing can happen is really powerful. Uh, and on a macro level, like thinking about the shifts that the pivots that you have to make in your business or your family, or in certain relationships, or maybe you just found out you came down with said illness. Well, you got to shift the way you eat and the way you move, right? Like those things can happen too. And in your business as a leader, like how maybe you just lost somebody that you'd had for years. Well, how are you going to pivot and adjust and adapt to that? Right? Maybe you lost a bunch of money in your company. Well, how are you going to shift and adapt to that? Or what if your business partner decides, he no longer wants to work with you anymore? Okay, well, how are you going to shift to adapt to that? Right? Those are all the skill, the wise mind that Lara was talking about is super effective in being adaptive. And I've honestly learned this from what we call adaptive athletes themselves. And the cool thing is at this Buffalo conference that we're talking about, Gretchen Evans and John Register are both what they would call adaptive athletes. So society would consider they have disabilities, or actually 1 in 4 of us have a disability. But we have coined the phrase adaptive because it's a way more empowering term. It's able to change. And Gretchen Evans, she's lost her hearing, has been blown up multiple times, has multiple TBIs. John Register has a missing limb, right? And they're out leading and they're changing and pivoting, and they've had to pivot so much. Could you imagine not being able to walk or having to walk differently, or your brain just not functioning the same way and having to change? But there's a beautiful movie called Beautiful Mind with was it Russell Crowe? Okay, anyway, yeah, Russell Crowe. Thank you. A beautiful book, beautiful movie, but it shows that they are great examples of change. Like you can change, and so I'll leave you with that. It's a topic that I could speak days on, but I'm excited to speak. I will be speaking on it at the Buffalo conference, and thank you, Laura, for having me speak on this.
Absolutely. That was, if you forgive the pun here, but that was mind blowing. Like it was just, that was absolutely amazing. And I loved hearing you talk about adaptability, and you touched on some very strong points there. And, if you guys haven't already noticed, like there's a theme going on here, right? So for those of you that have just joined us, I'm just going to reiterate, we're talking about leading with fear with the Buffalo Leadership Academy. And this is session 3, talking about leading with fear, but I'm not talking about the traditional fear. We are today are talking about focus, emotion, which is emotional intelligence, adaptability, and reverence. And Dr. Teresa just shared with us some incredible pointers on adaptability. And if you've been tuned in since the beginning, you will hear that from what John was talking about on the focus side, to what I was talking about on the emotional intelligence piece, and then with Dr. Teresa talking about the adaptive piece, they all sync together. I mean, I'm not leaving you out here yet, Philip. I mean, we're coming to you. We're coming to you. But I mean, this is absolutely incredible stuff, guys. And I'm telling you, if you want to learn more about what we're talking about here today, or you're just curious to learn, what else can we learn from these buffaloes? All you have to do is text the word buffalo, Buffalo. Just text the word buffalo. Get your phones out right now and open up your text app, put the word buffalo in, and text it to 33777. Have you done it yet? Yes? No? Comment in the chat. But it would be amazing to meet some of you. We do have a conference coming up in July, where we will be discussing a lot more on these topics. And Dr. Teresa, thank you so much. Really, thank you so much. That was incredible. And so we come on to our last point, but definitely not, by any means the least. We're coming over to you, my brother Philip. We're going to be discussing about reverence in leadership, and really, what does that even mean? So, and I'll just talk a little bit about this, and then Philip, I'd love for you to really open up to the audience and discuss about reverence. But I hear this quite often about all the different leadership qualities. What is the most important leadership attribute, and so forth. And there's so many that sometimes it's difficult to pinpoint one specifically, but reverence is certainly up there. And it's a leadership quality that really involves showing a lot of deep respect, and admiration and honor for others. And as a leader, that's incredibly important, because what do we do as leaders? We don't ever ask someone else to do something that we wouldn't do ourselves. And that's incredibly I know from my own personal experience, and as a leader in business, there's not one thing I've ever asked my team to do that I haven't already done. And so it's really just understanding as well, like I mentioned, having that deep respect, but understanding and having that admiration and acceptance of others, and recognizing their incredible skill sets and honoring those others for that. And that could be not just team members, but it could be your coworkers, it could be clients, it could be stakeholders, it could be your family, it could be your kids, whatever that is. It's reverence in leadership is really about acknowledging the value and worth of others, and just treating them with that dignity and that care, regardless of who they are, regardless of their status, or their background or their position. And Philip, that really leads me over to you. I mean, would you just explain a little bit more to our audience here today as to what does reverence mean to you, and how as leaders can we lead with reverence?
Yeah, thanks, Laura. It's an honor. Love to talk about reverence. First, let me just say as a caveat, though, that Navy SEALs and military members, we experience fear, the real fear, like the traditional fear. right? Fear it's a God-given emotion. It's okay. It's natural for us to feel fear. A couple summers ago, I was face to face with a mountain lion in my backyard. I was about 20 feet away from this thing, nature's killing machine. And trust me, I felt fear in that moment. The dangerous part, though, is when we allow that fear to really overwhelm us, to really infiltrate who we are, our identities, and it becomes a fearful mindset. And that's really what paralyzes us in life. So, courage is not the absence of fear, it's simply just the grit, the determination to harness that fear and move forward through our fear, learning the lessons that are really valuable. So just wanted, as a disclaimer, feeling fear is not a bad thing. It's okay to feel fear, but what do we do once we're feeling that? What do we do with that fear that sometimes can paralyze us? So, but with reverence, many of you might hear the word reverence and you're thinking, okay, leadership and reverence. Well, isn't reverence something that we're supposed to have in church, right? I know that's when I first heard it. That's a little bit of where my mind went. But yeah, Laura, thank you for setting me up. I think you did a beautiful job of really kind of 50,000-foot view explaining what reverence was. And in my definition, similar to yours, reverence is really just a feeling of deep respect and admiration for someone. And I think oftentimes as leaders, sometimes we can get so wrapped up in the bottom line. We can get so wrapped up in our tasks and being so productive that we slip subconsciously into viewing people as, let's say, just as a means to an end, or just as like a cog in a machine, right? And we have this, we start to fall into this, what's in it for me, or how can I view you, what are you going to do for me kind of mentality. And when we do that, we really do ourselves and, more importantly, others a disservice. We can't look at them as just a cog in a machine, or just a means to an end. And when we do that, we really dehumanize them. We really disrespect who they are at the core, that makes them so unique as individuals. We really degrade them as people when we as leaders choose to look at people as simply just a cog in a machine, or just a means to an end, or what are you going to do for me kind of today. And I think this is probably common sense, but common sense is not so common nowadays. But you and I, all of us Buffaloes, we don't have any more inherent value or worth than anyone else that we lead, and vice versa as well too. We don't have any more inherent value. And so looking at people as individuals that have their own unique hopes and dreams and talents and abilities is so important when we are leading them with reverence. And when we as leaders show reverence, we demonstrate that deep respect and appreciation for them, for our teammates, and we highlight their accomplishments and their contributions to the team. And by the way, just when you go to acknowledge someone, when you go to acknowledge their contributions and highlight that and really affirm them, and to give them accolades for that, don't just pull them aside individually, one-on-one, and kind of be generic, like, hey, good job today. But make sure you're really being very specific with your praise. Be very specific with your compliments to them. And that really helps them identify, oh, this is what I did right. And that was really helpful, rather than being generic. And do it publicly. Do it in a corporate environment, maybe with your team that's there. Do that in front of them. Give them that praise for their accomplishments and their contributions, because that'll really go a long way. When I was looking at reverence and thinking about what I want to talk about today, I was reminded of the Harvard Business School. They did a review, they did a study back in 2020, and they surveyed 250 of the Fortune 500 company CEOs out there. And they said, basically, they asked them, hey, what are the core aspects of every healthy, well-functioning, thriving, not just surviving, but thriving team that's out there? The two top things that really emerged from that study, the first one was trust, and the second one was safety. And trust and safety, emotional safety, both of these are really grounded and rooted in reverence. It's important as leaders that we can trust that our teammates, our team members are going to show up on time. They're going to be reliable. They're going to be dependable and do a good job and get the job done. And secondly, it's very important for them to feel safe, emotionally safe within the culture of our teams. Emotionally safe is huge. And Reverence really does a lot to build the safety, making sure that we feel comfortable within our team. There's a few things that can really erode the safety in a team, like gossip, slander, backstabbing, jealousy, pride. The list goes on as far as just these things are like cancer. They just eat at the team, and it really erodes the trust and the safety and the reverence that we as leaders are really striving to try to maintain within our teams. And as leaders, we have to demonstrate, you guys have heard me say this before, we have to demonstrate the behavior that we want to see in others. So as leaders, when we demonstrate reverence, what are we doing? We're actually cultivating a very positive work environment. We help others feel valued, especially when we recognize, like I said, their achievements. And this really starts to build inspiration within our teammates. I like to kind of think of this as the domino effect. As I'm talking today, it's like just picture one domino hitting another, hitting another, hitting another. And the first domino is reverence. And when we show them that reverence, that second domino, that's really creating a positive work environment. And then that third domino is we inspire them, to do their best, to really be motivated to do their best. What else does it do? It also boosts morale. That's another domino there in the domino effect. It boosts morale. When we as leaders show reverence to our team, to those who are leading, it really builds motivation. I mean, that's the $1 million question that I get nowadays is, Phil, how can I build and cultivate intrinsic motivation within someone? It's really hard to do. But when we as leaders show reverence, an appropriate and just a great amount of reverence and deep respect and value for our teammates, it really builds a lot of motivation within them. That intrinsic motivation is huge. And then it also builds creativity. It increases creativity within the team. And I found this very fascinating. I'm not the brightest crayon in the box. So as far as creativity goes, I don't think that I'm at the tip of the spear there for creativity. But when we show reverence to our teammates, to our teams, we actually are building creativity. And why creativity? Because when our team members, they feel safe, like we just talked about, there's a high level of trust and safety, and we respect their ideas and their abilities, guess what happens? They're more likely to take risks by coming up with new and innovative ideas. So it actually, the creativity and the productivity ends up increasing when we have reverence, when we build that esteem, and when we help them to feel safe and really respect their ideas and their abilities. And it turns out too that when we build reverence as leaders, that people feel valued, respected, and trusted. That they actually work harder. They work harder and they're more productive, like I just said. And who doesn't want a team that's working hard and that's being very productive, especially in our Western culture where we value productivity so much? And so these are some of the dominoes that start to fall, but they all lead with, and they all start with the reverence that we as leaders show them. And let's just be very honest here. It actually affects our bottom line financially as well too, because when we build reverence within our team, there's a high increase of loyalty. There's a high increase of loyalty. And why is that important? Because the more loyal people are in an organization, guess what? Less people quit, right? The attrition rates go down. As attrition rates go down, well, we end up saving money on hiring, right, and training new employees as well too. So it saves us more money, but the money is kind of like the icing on the cake kind of thing. But the cake itself, the real meat of all of this, is really showing that reverence towards others, really respecting them and showing value to them. We talked a lot about emotional intelligence today, drawing out the emotions, the good emotions and the hard emotions too, within our teammates. Identifying those emotions and talking about them in a very safe atmosphere is crucial as leaders, as we're trying to lead with reverence. And then the last thing I want to talk about, I want to highlight, there's a, in the financial world, Raymond James, many of you have heard of Raymond James. They're a high-end broker dealer in the financial world, and they have a really astute and a very strong reputation of having a culture of high reverence. They value their employees, and they know this, and they have that reputation in the financial industry at Raymond James to really showing a lot of reverence and value and respect for their employees. And guess what happens? Another great thing that comes from reverence is that they actually are able to attract really top high performers, top talent. There are people that with a lot of skills and abilities that want to go work for Raymond James. And the same is true for us as well too. So as you build a culture, a work environment of reverence, you're going to attract those people. It's very attractive. And I know it might be a little fearful as well too, especially if you're maybe used to leading with the real fear, do as I say and not as I do. And, it's my way or the highway kind of thing. It might be a little fearful to kind of step outside of your box and try to lead with reverence, but it's so very, very important that we as leaders, that we lead by example and demonstrate that reverence for people. And this, I know I've been talking a lot about the business environment, but this also applies to our personal lives as well too. Sometimes it's hard to be a parent. I have 5 kids at home, and my wife and I, we are the leaders in our family. And sometimes I want to come down with an iron fist, with my kids, and I'll punish them, and there's consequences, but I don't want my kids to fear me. I want to really establish and create a high family value of reverence, of respect, and really trusting them, creating safety within our home, that emotional safety, and valuing and respecting them. And that all comes from that initial domino of reverence. So I know our time is getting pretty close. We got a couple minutes left. So Laura, I'm going to turn things back over to you, my friend.
Wow, Philip, that was absolutely incredible. I'm kind of speechless right now because I think you hit on so many incredible points. And if you've just joining us at the end here, we are the Buffalo Leadership Academy. We are talking today on session 3, which is leading with fear, but not the traditional fear. We have had a tremendous discussion today on focus, emotion, adaptability, and reverence. And Philip just finished off with how leading with reverence is one of the most important attributes in leadership, because if you honor others and you are really respecting others' ideas and opinions, and you're able to, in fact, let's piece it together. I'll piece it all together. So if you lead with that reverence, and you have that focus, as John was talking about, on very specific outcomes of what you're trying to achieve, well, by leading with reverence is going to earn that loyalty, with your team, and being able to understand the emotional intelligence piece of that and applying those skills that we talked about earlier. You're going to be able to read the room very quickly and adapt, as Dr. Teresa just said earlier today. You'll be able to adapt to that specific situation, maybe modify your behavior, and accept others for who they are, but really being able to piece together an incredible team where the core element of all of that is not leading with fear, the traditional fear, but leading with our acronym of FEAR. And that, once again, is focus, emotion, adaptability, and reverence. And so I thank you all today for joining us. Our chat has completely blown up. I've seen multiple different comments on here. Another one's just come in. Karen, we've got Lucas, Michael, Joseph, Steve. Thank you so much. We'll take a look at these. If anyone's got any questions, just feel free to reach out to us. All you have to do is text the word Buffalo. That's Buffalo, Buffalo, to 33777. So if you have not done that, do it now. Buffalo to 33777. We do have a conference coming up in July. So please get in touch with us if you'd like to attend. You will meet us all personally and learn a lot of skills and techniques of different strategies and ways you can implement a lot of what we've talked about here today, but it's more extensive because we actually have an entire day to discuss it. So if this has resonated with you today, and if you're still online and you're listening, just type a yes in the chat. It'd be great to hear from you. But thank you so much to my fellow buffaloes as well for just being incredible leaders and just showing so many others out there that if you apply the focus, the emotional intelligence, the adaptability, and the reverence piece, you won't be leading with the traditional fear, but instead we're going to change that fear piece and create that loyalty, that laser focus, modifying our behavior and adapting to situations, and really fully understanding our human beings around us. So thank you so much today, guys. It's been an absolute honor and pleasure to present with all of you today. And thank you to our wonderful audience for listening. And yeah, we'll see you next time. And don't forget, July 21st, the Buffalo Leadership Conference is coming up. So if you haven't signed up for it, sign up today. Text the word Buffalo to 33777, and we'll see you there.